right, so today's topics, as we do this real quick, um, Regents prep, multiple choice level knowledge is really the focus. We're not talking super detailed writing or anything like that. The focus of what today is just kind of the basics, those foundational pieces we've talked about in class, where we're building the foundation. And once you have that foundation, the basics, we can build more details on top of that, top of that. This is the foundation piece. All right. So we're going to do today World War I. Between the world wars, particularly the rise of dictatorships, right? The the Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, like totalitarianism in between the world wars is really going to be our focus, and then World War II and the Holocaust. So we'll dive right in here. Um, okay, a way to remember the causes of World War I, something you should know, is Maine. So if you see anything about the lead up to World War I, or even one of those CRQs, those short answers about historical circumstances that led up to World War I or something related to World War I, or there's a document that's about something we'll talk about in a minute, the assassination of the Archduke Francis Ferdinand. You can then talk about the long term causes. So let's talk a little about them. Here's the acronym: Maine, M, militarism, A, alliances. Also, if we say Maine, there's a second A in there, a short term cause. If we just want to say causes and cross out the long-term idea there. You could do that if you want to, um, but we don't necessarily need to do that. So, like, I will have it disappear here. There we go. Look at it as it goes away. Causes of World War I: main two ways: assassination of the Archduke. Right. There were two opposing alliances leading up to World War I. That's the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente. The Triple Alliance is basically Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy. The Triple Entente: Russia, France, and Great Britain. Imperialism. There was tension around the world as countries are competing for colonies, in particular in Africa, where we'd had Germany as a newer country and Italy as a newer country wanting to get in on the imperialism game. So it just caused increased tensions around the world. And then nationalism. Remember, I gave two reasons for nationalism in class. One, my country is better than yours, and so it leads to conflict. But also, the other kind of nationalism, as we get into what causes the war, the direct spark: Austria Hungary annexes Bosnia Herzegovina, and this sort of ticks off Serbian nationalists, leading to that short term cause, or the potential other A, which disappeared too fast for me to make an A, but you could probably imagine it: the assassination of the Archduke. That's the spark that starts World War I, right? It's the thing that begins the war. So, with that short term cause, the assassination of the Archduke, everything spirals out. And we're not going to get into a ton of the details here. But long story short, Austria Hungary declares war on Serbia, but we have alliances. That brings Russia in to protect their friend Serbia. That brings Germany in to protect their friend Austria Hungary. That brings France in because they were allies, right? And it spirals. And slowly but surely, you have a world war. One guy got shot. The alliances do a really good job explaining, though, how that causes a world war, right? A local thing potentially involves Britain, eventually involves the United States. Okay, some other things. We have the Balkans are seen as the powder keg of Europe. Um, Okay, the powder keg of Europe. Why? Because of all of these rivalries, of this nationalism in this part of the world. If you remember later in the course, we had um, this nationalism when we talked about the breakup of Yugoslavia, this same part of the world. Nationalism can unite people, but it also can divide and cause conflict. These are all little details, little facts about World War One. We spent time on technology. So, an enduring issue, potential enduring issues essay on your Regents exam could be the impact of science and technology on history. And World War One would be a great one because think just trench warfare in and of itself. You've got the use of poison gas, you've got barbed wire, you've got machine guns, you've got landmines, you've got the first tanks, you've got the first airplanes. We talked about like dogfights, early dogfights of World War One. Gas masks, right? All these technologies and the impact they have on the war, on the stalemate where sides weren't really moving. They were just wearing each other down. We use the term war of attrition, right? So that was all about trench warfare. Remember the poison gas being more dense, so it would often settle in the trenches. I threw in this fact about propaganda here, even though I didn't highlight it. Sometimes they'll ask, they'll even have like propaganda posters as a document on the regions. So just understand the biggest thing was to get public support for the war, or here's why our enemy's bad, right? A nationalism bit. So that's overall the purpose of World War II propaganda. Okay, so couple of things, but if you see the Treaty of Versailles and you read this, the first thing in your head you should think is, okay, this is what ended World War One. That should be the first thing you think. After that, punish Germany. Everything in the treaty was designed around that. Okay. We had talked about Wilson's 14 points and how Europe basically rejected most of them, but it was punish Germany. And the big thing, and I have it right there, bolded reparations. The idea, and if you don't know what it is, jot a little note in. Reparations are payments for war damages. Germany, you're going to pay the cost of this war. Now, that has its roots back when Napoleon lost and the Frank and sorry, the Franco-Prussian Wars, and like we have all this stuff going on in Europe leading up to this. In the Franco-Prussian War, Russia eventually united Germany. France has to pay the cost of that war. So France is going to get it back, and they're going to get more than that. Germany's going to pay. They take territory from Germany. There's the war guilt clause that says all the clauses in this treaty are justified because we blame Germany for the entire war because they told Austria Hungary, we got your back. So Austria Hungary acted aggressively knowing Germany supported them. That's at least the excuse given for the harshness here. And then the League of Nations is a part of this. So for your own thinking, keep straight. If it's League of Nations, it's after World War One. If it's the UN or the United Nations, it's after World War II. So just keep those two things straight. Okay. The League of Nations, they're bad at their job. The point is to keep peace. We have World War II. They couldn't enforce anything. The most powerful country in the world, the United States, didn't join. So they're bad at their job. They can't enforce anything. And when we talked in between the wars about appeasement and the ineffectiveness of the League of Nations, this played a big part. They couldn't actually enforce anything. So they could say, "Oh, Japan, you shouldn't do that." And Japan would go, "Yeah, we're going to do it anyway." "Oh, Italy, don't do that." "No, we're going to ignore you and do it anyway." "Oh, Germany, please stop." Nope. League of Nations couldn't do anything. We looked at that cartoon in class where the United States was the keystone in that bridge that was missing, right? Okay. So now the other thing, another major event, and again, the World War One is a turning point, but you could see the Bolshevik Revolution one as well. The Bolshevik Revolution, communist, right? So if you see the Bolshevik Revolution on your Regents exam, you should think communist. And hey, I put it in red because the color often associated with communism, the eventual Soviet flag, right? We have the Bolshevik Revolution. And from this point until the end of the Cold War, we will basically start calling Russia the Soviet Union. Now, they are not the exact same thing. Russia, modern day Russia, and the Soviet Union are not the same thing. A bunch of independent countries that used to be a part of the Soviet Union, right? That weren't necessarily a part of traditional Russia. Some were, some weren't. But we'll get into that more later. But for your purposes, kind of think that that happens. Um, their slogan, peace, bread, land. And I highlight something the Regents is focused on before that. World War I creates conditions that help lead to the revolutions. Things were real bad. The economy was bad. Russia was not doing well in the war. And it also, you could compare the Bolshevik Revolution and the French Revolution. The most extreme groups come to power. If you watch the last video, it was, we had a focus on the fact that the radicals, the Jacobins came to power during the Reign of Terror, right? During the French Revolution. Extreme conditions sometimes lead to the radical groups coming to power. And the Bolsheviks were that too. They end up coming to power and they're led by Lenin. Oh, before we do this, if we're talking why is the Bolshevik Revolution a turning point? Because it lays the groundwork for a communist Russia or Soviet Union, and eventually after World War II, the Cold War. So if you end up having to do that, that works. Okay, here's a cartoon. Might look semi-familiar to you. We talked about it in class. It looks like um, or we talked, yeah, we did do this in class and talked about it. Which statement best represents the cartoonist's point of view? Whoop, that was supposed to be circled, but you get my point. Point of view. What does the artist think? What does the cartoonist think? That's basically what point of view means on your Regents. And it says, let's look at all the sources here. Okay, Chicago Tribune, 1914. All right, listen, I am not going to tell you, make sure you memorize all these dates. But I will say that having a general understanding that 1914 to 1918 or just around that time is World War One. That's the Roman, that's an I, that's a Roman numeral one, World War One. If you understand that, then a lot of sources that you see, you can just apply what you know about World War One, right? That's kind of one of the big things is like that clue alone, that date, you can go, ooh, I bet this has to do with World War One. Now, there's all their clues here. So if it's hard for you to read, you have the paper in front of you. But I want to point out a couple of things before we read the rest of the choices. So we're looking for what is the cartoonist attitude. Let's look at what we have back here. The peace of Europe. Looks like someone killed the peace of Europe because look at, there is a sword stuck in. The crime of the ages seems like murder. Someone killed the peace of Europe. Who did it? This hand here, whoever that hand is, we don't exactly know, but is pointing right at the peace of Europe, right? Who did it? Asking all these people potentially, because they're all looking at whoever this hand is. And we can see Germany and Russia pointing at each other. We can see Austria and Serbia. The Austrian Archduke was assassinated by a Serbian nationalist, right? Then everybody else is pointing at Germany. Remember, Germany eventually blamed for World War One. The war guilt clause, if you look back a page at the notes, war guilt clause, they're blamed. And here is Italy standing off to the side. Why are they off to the side? You don't necessarily need to know this for your exam, but for history, Italy actually doesn't join the war on the side of their allies. They are allies with Austria and Germany, the Triple Alliance, but they stay out of the war because they say, you guys were aggressive. We had a defensive alliance. And later on in the war, they actually join France and um, France and Britain, United States, like they're on that side of the war at the end of the war. So, what is the cartoonist point of view? Working together will bring peace back to Europe. She's been stabbed by a sword in the chest. I don't think she's coming back to life. She's not being restored. Germany is positioned to revive the peace. The question isn't who can fix it, it's who did it, who killed this person. They're pointing at Germany, not to say you can fix this. They're the problem, right? So two is not correct. The nation of Italy was not guilty of any crimes in Europe. Now I get why you'd pick this if you're literally applying, if you're looking at the cartoon literally. So here's where you need to maybe have a little bit of historical knowledge of like, yeah, Italy's off here by themselves and no one's pointing at them, but it's not saying they're not guilty of anything, right? So like, is this their point of view? I get why you might not eliminate it outright, but now say there's plenty of blame to go around for the death of peace in Europe. Serbia has someone pointing at them. Austria has someone pointing at them. Russia has someone pointing at them, and Germany has 4 people pointing at them. There seems to be blame going around. Serbia, Austria, Germany, Russia. 4 different countries have people pointing at them to blame them. That's the right answer. Okay, so if you narrowed it down to 3 and 4 and you literally didn't know, okay, you had a 50-50 chance instead of a 25% chance in guessing, but I hope you could have looked at choice 4 and been like, "That one makes the most sense," even if you're not sure. Let's go to the next question. Oh, no, that's it. Um, I'm gonna clear this. Between the world wars. Okay, I'm gonna go a little faster in this part. Totalitarian dictators. Okay. Total control. All aspects of life. Fear and censorship. There were other things we talked about too, right? Control of the economy, in the press. We talked about the cult of personality, where the leader is all things to all people. Um, we looked at things where Stalin was like Father Stalin, but also like Stalin means steel. He's also super strong. So there is that. I'm just giving you here an example with Stalin and the 5-year plans. That's the control of the economy, right? Purges, eliminating your enemies. That's another characteristic. I didn't talk about it up here, but use of fear, eliminating your opponents. We looked at the photos where he edited people out of. So that's like censorship and fear, right? He eliminated these people and then he erased them, and then creating a cult of personality. This I am all things to all people thing that all dictators do. I'm good at everything and are all things to all people. Okay, I'm going to clear the text and we're going to go to the next slide. Just real quickly to understand between the world wars. Um, Leading up to Hitler's rise to power, Germany's economy was hurt in part because of reparations. It wasn't the whole reason, but like they were blamed for that at least, right? So reparations hurt it. They have huge inflation in part due to reparations. It's a little more complicated than that, but like their economy's in shambles. So radicals often come to power. So Hitler blames the Weimar Republic, the government of Germany, for this. The League of Nations is powerless, so they can't stop Hitler, and they can't stop Italy's aggression in Ethiopia, Japan invading Manchuria. They don't do anything. And then we have these new boundary lines that create some hostility. We have people who used to be a majority ethnic group in their old country being boundary lines redrawn. They're now an ethnic minority in their new nation. So it actually causes some more nationalism in some ways in Europe. Okay. Based on the information on this chart, which situation gave rise to power? So we ought to, again, even if we can't exactly pick out the right answer, we should at least be able to narrow down wrong ones just by using the chart. So what situation gave rise to power? Global prosperity and trade. Well, I'm not going to go into tons of detail here, but like economic problems and worldwide depression. That does not sound like prosperity. Everything's going well. People are rich. The expansion of Germany's colonial empire. The opposite is said right here, guys. So that one is not correct. The success of the Weimar Republic. I mean, even if you don't know that the Weimar Republic's downfall leads to the rise of Hitler, I mean, you know, but political or economic instability. Things aren't super stable. We have quarrels among political groups, and we have all these economic problems, unemployment, depression, inflation, the value of money going down, prices going up. The answer is 4. But again, you should have been able to eliminate the first 3 pretty easily. If there's a question like this ever on your exam, you should get it right. You just should. It's right there for you, okay? All right, World War II, very quick. Thing we spent the most time on in class was appeasement. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But I want to point out the 3 examples of failures of the League of Nations. The League of Nations is bad at its job. Remember, word like chronology. The League of Nations is after World War One. It being bad at its job could be seen as a cause of World War II. Okay. And I just give you a list of 3 examples of that. But then we get appeasement. You give in to demands to keep peace. So he increases his army. The Treaty of Versailles said he couldn't do that. Hitler does. The Treaty of Versailles says he couldn't do that. He does it anyway. Nothing happens. Hitler reoccupies the Rhineland, which was not supposed to have German troops in it. They don't stop him. The Anschluss, or the annexing of Austria, adding Austria to Germany, that was forbidden. He did it anyway. He demands the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia that he says, hey, there's Germans living here. That should be a part of Germany. And Neville Chamberlain hands it over to him. And I'm going to write that name down here for you because if you see in any source at all, either the author or in a question or a picture of him or him's mentioned in the source, Neville Chamberlain, you should immediately think appeasement. He gives the Sudetenland to Hitler at the Munich conference and says, we have secured peace for our time. Not that long after Hitler invades the rest of Czechoslovakia, and appeasement is a failure. Okay, the US remains neutral early. I have the two opposing forces, the Allied powers and the Axis powers. Um, Also, something that has come up, and I'll write it in here. The Blitzkrieg of Poland is a lightning war. It is not trench warfare. We're going to move fast like lightning. The Blitzkrieg of Poland, Germany invades Poland, right? Um, Germany invades the Soviet Union. We're not going to get into the details of why, but compare that to Napoleon invading Russia. The climate and the size of Russia make it difficult. The Russian winter is one reason why Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union fails. I list some turning points of the war. The Battle of Midway. After that, Japan wins no further major naval battles in the Pacific War. Battle of Stalingrad. Germany's troops are in retreat in the east since then. And D-Day is that invasion of the Western Front, recreating a Western Front. Um, Early event of World War II, the invasion of Poland, the Blitzkrieg, and the last big event of World War II, the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ends the war. And the Regents has asked that a lot. They'll have a document about one of the bombings, and then it's like, what was the effect of this? The war in the Pacific ended, Japan surrendered, the end of World War II, whatever it might be, something like that has often been the answer. All right. Now I'm going to delete this text. Um, I didn't highlight this, but understand, like you should understand the basics of this, right? Why did that not clear? Give me a second. There it is. So what led up to the Holocaust, or the historical circumstances that led up to? Um, we have anti-Semitic policies like the Nuremberg laws. Again, you see Nuremberg, you should think anti-Jewish Nuremberg laws, anti-Jewish laws. Um, and it ends up with this escalation. And we talked about all the characteristics of genocides, dehumanizing people, marking them, othering them is what that's sometimes called as well, seeing them as enemies, relocating them so they can be easily spotted or easily identified and kept together. We have these concentration camps and later death camps like Auschwitz. Um, the results of the Holocaust: 6 million Jews die in the Holocaust. Other 6 million that the Nazis deem undesirable, they were targeted as well. And this is a genocide, the attempted killing of a people in whole or in part. This is a human rights violation for an enduring issues essay. Whether it's a document that they give you or not, you could talk about the Holocaust as a human rights violation in these genocides, which unfortunately we talk about several for the rest of the course after this, right? Um, all right. So as we look really quickly at this one, and this is similar to what I was telling you that they often have on the exam. I'm not going to necessarily read through this whole document for you. I encourage you to pause and to read it now if you have it in front of you, or to read it on your screen. But I want to point out where it says 60% of Hiroshima was obliterated by the lone atomic bomb dropped on Sunday. It was announced in Guam last night. I'll just read the whole thing. 5 industrial plants disappeared and additional damage was done beyond the wiped out area. Only 2.8 square miles of the city's 6.9 square miles remained. Now, I didn't do my own advice, which was read the questions. What event is described? Okay. And um, which event uh, which historical developments followed the events described in this excerpt, right? That's the other potential thing. So, what event is described? Well, it's the atomic bombing, right? But let's keep reading. The city disappeared in a cloud of smoke, flame, and dust that rose 40,000 feet. So, if you see Hiroshima or Nagasaki, that's the atomic bombs. The missile struck the center of the target. A flash brighter than sunlight covered the city, and several minutes later, the smoke cloud reached up to the stratosphere. Okay, what event is described? The use of a deadly new weapon against Japan. Well, that sounds right to me, right? Oh boy, that wasn't what I wanted. That seems right to me. Is the use of a new weapon. But let's read all four choices. The invasion of Guam by the United States. Okay, honestly, a lot of people who missed this question picked it. Why? Well, because they saw Guam here. But this doesn't say Guam was invaded. It just said they announced this in Guam. Just because they mentioned Guam isn't right. Okay. You just need to know Hiroshima, the first atomic bombs used against Japan. And if you know that, like honestly, one should be obvious. This is kind of an easy question if you know the basic thing. The firebombing of Tokyo. Tokyo is not mentioned on here at all. Attack by the Soviet Union on Germany. I mean, if you picked that, you totally guessed and had no idea about anything, right? Because it doesn't say anything about either of those countries in this document. And Hiroshima, if you see it, Nagasaki, if you see it, that's the atomic bombs against Japan. So what happens? Well, I told you before, World War II ended, right? Japan entered a period of isolation. Nope, that was during the Tokugawa way at the beginning of this course. The war in Europe came to an end. The war in Europe was already over at this point. Germany had already surrendered. Japan's also not in Europe, so it doesn't make sense. Japan annexed Korea and Manchuria once again. Japan got bombed here, right? So, like, that doesn't make sense that they would add territory because of the atomic bombs being used on them. Japan surrendered, bringing the war to an end. Remember, I said the Regents has been asking questions like this a lot. The result of the atomic bombs, the war ends. The war in the Pacific ends. Japan surrenders, whatever it may be. So just be ready for that. Okay, so again, these aren't even all the types of questions, right? We're going to go over that more in review in class and all the practice questions they have online, all the practice exams. You go through and just maybe go through those practice exams or the old exams they post online and go through them and see, okay, what World War I questions are on here, what Bolshevik Revolution questions, what about Hitler and Stalin and Mussolini and dictatorships is on here, or between the war economy stuff is on there, and then World War II stuff. One thing I didn't mention, I'll do it right now. The United Nations is formed after World War II. That wasn't in this, but that's something else too that you can maybe be aware of as a result of World War II. All right, so keep at it, and we'll do this again next time.